Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone here to the Town of Stellarton Special Council meeting June 6, 2023 at 12 noon start time here at the council chambers. It's a budget meeting. The agenda is in front of us. Is there any changes or additions to the agenda? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve it, please?
I move to approve.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Knight, second by Councillor Pence. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Contrary minded, motion carried Nancy, thank you. So we'll move into the budget discussion and preparation.
So we've started the budget preparations, and we are at a point where we are proposing a tax rate increase. With that in mind, I wanted to review the general operating budget to go through why we've come up with that. The document you have in front of you, the design of it is to start with revenue as we know it, reduce it for required expenditures, and what is left over is what we are working with to balance the budget. So for general operating, we start with tax revenue based on current tax rates. So that's $1 from memory, $1.82 and $1.82 residential resource, and $4.15 commercial. From that revenue, in addition to that revenue, we also get the municipal financial capacity grant, the street crime funding, and an admin charge to the water utility. That revenue is about $800,000. We also get some miscellaneous revenue. Sorry, I missed a line there of about $500,000. That's the grants in lieu, that's interest, that's sale of service, the HST offset, student funding. So the total of the taxes at the current rate of about $7.481 million, the other revenue of about $488,000, the capacity street crime unit funding, and the utility, we have about $8.8 million in total revenue. That's what we're starting with. That will become significantly decreased by the time we get to the operational costs. Out of that $8.8 million, we have to pay the school board costs. That's the Cobequid Centre Regional Centre for Education, corrections, and the housing deficit. They're all about $1 million. So we're down to about $7.8 million. Staffing, this is your level of service. Current level of staffing, if you want to keep current level of service, we have to maintain current level of staffing. Overall salaries and benefits are about $3.7 million, almost half of the $7.7 million in net revenue. After reduction for staffing costs, the balance is about $4 million. So we're already at less than half of the 8.8. We then have commitments to outside service providers. This includes ERIC, Fire Protection, the Wellness Center, Solid Waste, CHAD and Public Transit, PBSC, the Library Grant, the Victor County Partnership, the Branch Library, and Deans. Those costs are $1.6 million. That leaves us with about $2.354 million. Out of that, we have to pay committed debt payments, principal and interest, to the tune of $478,000. The balance is $1.8 million. So we started at 8.8, and we now have 1.8. And that 1.8 has to pay all of the operating costs for the town. That 1.8 is going to fund legislative services, which is council expenses, conferences, town hall costs, that's heat, light, repair and maintenance, IT, insurance and professional fees, includes legal, audit, CPCL for the mine reclamation, the AROs for asset management, tax exemptions and grants to organization for 108, general government operations for about 103, again, training, office supplies, postage, computer, advertising, phone, etc. Police operations, this does include crosswalk guards, safe communities, and animal control, and also all other policing costs, including vehicles, policing supplies, et cetera, for $239. Fire operations for $167. This includes all the costs of the fire station itself for the firefighting force as well. Planning operations at $55,000. Homecoming for $20,000. Public Works operations for about $867,000. What you see in red is already included in that $867,000. So in the $867,000, vehicle-related costs are about $251,000. Salt for the winter patching and line painting, $235,000. Street, sidewalk, and sewer repair and maintenance, about $108,000. Again, those numbers are included in the $867,000. Also included in Public Works that would be the town barn, the cost of the street lights, training, sweeper truck, and signage. Recreation and cultural operations, $127,000. Included in that $127,000, we have recreation equipment for $10,000. That's adaptive equipment for the equipment loan program. Baseball fields for $30,000, which includes dirt and fertilizer for 7 fields, porta potties for the summer, lime, and the powdered line marking. Soccer fields for $12,400, which is 2 new nets and the field paint. Parks and trails, which is a gazebo. And the community center costs, those are operating costs at $12,000. Those costs add up to $2.1 million, but we only have $1.876 to fund. So we are showing a deficiency of $263,000. To note, in the year, we are expecting the ERIC costs to be decreased by $100,000 over last year's costs. If that didn't decrease, this number would have been minus $363,000. Interesting to note, last year's negative was $364,000. We budgeted minus $350,000. So if you recall this time last year, we were in a deficiency position to the tune of $350,000. And council agreed that they were not changing the tax rates, but the $350,000 would come from operating reserve. We're effectively at the same amount this year as last year. What that's telling us is that the PVSC value increases did fund operational increases from last year, 22-23, to the current budget of 23-24. What's not funded is a deficiency from last year. And we cannot continue to fund deficiencies out of reserves. The reserves don't have a funnel of money going into it. So at this point, we are recommending a tax rate increase. The tax rate increase we are proposing, and this rate will maintain the same proportion between residential and commercial, is a 6-cent increase in residential and resource, and a 15-cent increase on commercial. To equate that based on a $100,000 property, the 6-cent increase is $60 on a $100,000 property for residential resource, and it's $150 on a $100,000 value for commercial. The 6-cent increase and the 15-cent increase will provide the deficiency close enough that we can make it balance of $258,000, which would make the revised rates $1.88 residential resource and $4.30 for commercial. Now, do you want me to continue on with the others, or do you want to ask questions on the general operating fund first? I can go through them all if you'd rather.
Might as well do general operating first. We'll ask some questions on that first.
Okay,
So I just wanted to thank you for the information and the presentation.
no problem.
Just for the public's knowledge, we've been back and forth with staff. Council has been over the last few months trying to make sure that all efficiencies have been recognized and that the increases are as low as possible. And I think that's been accomplished with the staff's been worked really hard on finding more efficiencies. We thought it might be a bigger increase to begin with, but we've come to a lower point, so we're happy with that. I will mention too that if this increase is approved, we'll still be the lowest taxed residential town in Pictou County. And our commercial tax rate will still be very competitive as well. And I'll say also, 2 years ago, we didn't have to raise taxes because the province doubled the equalization payment. Last year, as Brenda mentioned, we didn't have to do it because we went into our reserves. We can't go into reserves every year to avoid a tax increase. We'll be broke if we do that. So we have to be prudent and financially responsible, and I think this is what we have to do, but there is some more questions that will come from the councilors as well. I'll let them go now. I might have a couple more by the time they're done.
There's only one thing I'd like to mention here, is we, as municipal units within the province of Nova Scotia, we have to balance our budget every year. We're not allowed to go into a deficit situation like the federal and provincial government does.
Thank you for pointing that out, Councilor Pence.
Yeah.
Other questions?
Yes, Your Worship. Your Worship, you mentioned that 2 years ago we got a doubled equalization, but we also got money last year from the province.
Referring to the 477? Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we got 477,000 as well last year, which is almost equal.
But that is, it's
Capital.
told how we are
No,
supposed to spend it?
not this year. Talking about last year as well, we got, no?
No.
No? That's
No.
it? That
Yeah,
was
the 477 is the only one.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments before I ask a question. If anyone have been listening to the budget deliberation for the last few years, at every single one of them, I have cautioned against that we're going to get to the point at one time in the future that we're going to have to raise taxes. This is not a decision that we have made lightly. It was a very difficult decision, but we were faced with the challenge of reducing our services, i.e. reducing staff, or raising taxes. Just for the records, we haven't raised taxes since 1997. That is a long time for any municipality or any business of that matter to sustain. As you have seen right now in the last couple of years, inflation have been rampant in the retail industry. And we have seen it as well when you're trying to buy equipment or buy anything to repair or do any project. We submitted a project for $1.6 million, came back at $2.6 million. We can't really afford to do that. This is not a new story for us, but we have been able to try and maintain with the resources that we have. Unfortunately, this year came to a head, and as much as we tried to be lean, we weren't able to. Brenda, thank you for mentioning that $60 on a $100,000 value for residential. This is an important number for everybody so that they can relate what's that increase is. So if your house is worth $100,000, your tax increase a year will be $60. If your house is worth $200,000, your tax increase will be $120. What I didn't see in this year is a comparison with what we are, how do we average against our neighboring communities. And to my understanding, we are still a lower tax bracket than our neighbors.
Yes, and also to note, Stellarton only has one tax rate. There are no user fees. So when comparing to other municipalities, you have to take into account any user fees. For the town, we include everything in one tax rate. So if you translate the user fees into a tax-rated number to the value of $100,000, we are at the moment lower, yes.
So even though, you know, this is not so good news for our resident, but again, we are trying to do our best to minimize the effects on you. I assure you that all council and the staff has worked very diligently to try and make sure that the effects are minimal, but some things are, in this day and age, were unavoidable. The question that I have is our FCI, which is one of the financial indicators from the province on how does the town operates. If we are not to increase the tax rates, that will reflect very badly on the FCIs. What would be the ramification of continuous bad FCI on the town, please, if you can explain that.
Well, the FCIs are just what the name implies. They're financial condition indicators. So they are an indication of the financial sustainability of the town. So at the moment, the town is in a very positive position with the FCIs. The operating reserves are in the green, which is positive, which means we're above the 20%. The concern that I would be holding is the impact on the combined reserves. So the operating reserves is one factor, but I don't think it's the important one. The combined reserves is the one that takes into account your ability to replace capital. So if your combined reserve number is lower, you are limited in your ability to replace capital because you either take money out of the tax rate, which means you build it into your annual budget to purchase capital, you borrow, which we do, which is a way to fund, or you pay for it from reserves. Our combined reserves are in the yellow, and they're closer to the lower end of the yellow than the higher end of the yellow. Now, there are situations which bumps our reserves up in one year, and then they come back down in another. So I would like us to continue to be conscious of that impact on the combined reserves, and at this point in time, we are okay. But if we were to continue to deplete the reserves, we would go from yellow to red. It just means the town has very limited flexibility if something were to happen, such as Fiona. So at the moment, we have over $200,000 worth of costs incurred from Fiona for 22-23. We are still waiting to confirm whether those costs will be funded by the federal or provincial governments. At the moment, we have an assumption in our numbers that it will be funded. If it's not, we have to take $200,000 out of operating reserves. That is one of those unforeseen circumstances that we may or may not have funding for, and you need to be prepared for in terms of your reserves. So if that were to happen, there's another $200,000 that will come out of reserves. So one thing layers on the other, and eventually you would have very limited flexibility in terms of being able to function and purchase capital as you need it to run the town.
And that's what I was trying to get to. Thank you. In a simplified manner, it is our responsibility to manage the town properly. And the FCI indicators are one of the tools used by the province to kind of scorecard us. If we were to reach the red and sustain in the red for a certain period of time, that will give the province, I believe, the capability and right to interfere and ask us, what the hell are you doing? And we don't want to get to that point. So that is a very important part on our end as a steward of this town to make sure that we don't get to that situation where the province would have to interfere. Thank you, Brenda. On the business park, I know that we have, we've done a lot of work to the business park, and there's a few businesses coming, and it's growing, but we still have depth in there. When is that hopefully will be done with, so that we can spend some of that debt and interest on the debt into the town?
Somewhere else. So right now, in your interest and principal payments, so your total interest and principal is about $478,000, of which your principal is $360. $220 of that $360 is debt related to the business park. We still have another 8 years on that debt. So we will be going another 8 years before that debt is fully funded.
That's a significant amount.
Yeah, it's a significant amount, and it's a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if we sell more land, we should be in better position.
Selling more land will improve our reserves. Yes, money goes into reserves if we sell more land.
Okay. That would be it for me for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Brenda, for putting this together. Just a few questions is what you were talking about, $60 on 100,000. Now, is that based on like a realtor's assessment, or is that based on the assessment from the municipality?
That's based on the capped PDSC value assessments.
Okay, no,
Right.
somebody might home through real estate might be 200,000, where the cap might be 120 or 100,000.
Right,
That's
it's
what
what,
it
yeah,
is.
our tax rate is applied to the capped values.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing too, as we discussed, we were just talking about the park. The park has been a wonderful thing for the town. We get 50% of our revenue through commercial. It's helped us. Now, I think before you might have explained, but the park was carrying the tax base for a while. Am I correct in saying that? And now it's down to expenses are kind of catching up to that. Can you explain that, please?
At one point, when we looked at the cumulative cost on the budget of the business park, it was costing the taxpayers money, but we are beyond that now. The
Okay.
business park is funding itself from a cost perspective.
Okay, so
yes.
we were, okay. drawn
It
from
was
that.
in the
Thank you.
earlier years, but it did
Yes.
reach a point where it surpassed, so it is funding itself now.
So why was the D-transfer tax excluded from the revenue?
Right now, the D-transfer tax that comes into the town, which is not reflected in any of the presentation, 100% of that is transferred on to the wellness, to the D-transfer tax trust
Right.
to fund the wellness center and the hospital. So
Okay.
100% of the money in is transferred out. In our financial statements, you will see D-transfer tax revenue as a revenue item, but you will see a transfer to the D-transfer tax trust as an expense. So the revenue is out, but also the expenditure is not included in this as
The
well.
Nova Scotia Housing or the seniors housing complex. So we help subsidize. A lot of people think the province pays it 100%, but we pay a portion of that.
We
Now,
pay,
if something happens with the seniors complex and the money has to be put into it, are we accountable for that as well? So like if we budget, we'll just say some rough figures, 300,000 for the seniors, and something happens, like could that jump, we'll say like the 400,000 and we're committed to that?
we fund the annual operating / capital requirements.
Okay.
I can't speak to the building of a building, but the
No,
annual
I'm talking
operating.
about unexpected,
operating.
yeah, something would happen to it. Are we responsible to
We-
repair it or whatever?
We are responsible to fund any
Right.
deficiency.
Okay, a lot of people didn't know that.
We fund the
Yeah.
deficiency.
And the other thing too is schools. We're also accountable for the schools, like a lot of people think that's provincial as well, but
We fund the school board. The difference between the school board and the housing deficit is the school board is a finite number, which we know at the beginning of the year. We know exactly how much we're funding of the school board
Okay, so,
costs.
okay.
Whereas the housing deficit, we don't know the actual number until usually it's a couple of months after year end. We have estimates. So right now in these numbers, these are estimated numbers.
All right.
Once the actuals are known, then we have to fund the actual.
so the government puts so much money into that and we put so much money into it, is that correct?
I can't speak to what the provincial government does.
Okay,
I
all
can't
right,
speak to
thank
that.
you.
We do put $845,000 into
That's
the,
all close to $1 million. A lot of people don't realize that we,
Into the school board costs.
what additional debt commitment do we have coming up?
So in the current year, we did curbs and paving, which we're funding by debt. And we know that we're committing to a fire truck. So when the debt is out, the principal portion of the debt is always a year out from when you first commit to the debt. But we are looking at $100,000 plus of additional debt commitments starting in 24, 25.
And both
So-
of them are important. We certainly need we need fire protection. And our sewers and water need to be upgraded in these two particular streets. Now, we're falling short. The original estimate on that came in under what the actual cost is going to be.
Sorry, I missed what?
The original estimate for those two streets, they come in under what the actual cost is going to be.
I'm still, we're talking about Claremont and Kirk.
Yeah, I'm sorry. yeah.
Okay, sorry, I just wasn't sure what project we were talking about.
That's okay.
The Claremont and Kirk projects,
Yes.
the costs are coming in over
That's what I meant, yes.
what was
yes,
expected.
I'm sorry, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we haven't reviewed capital yet, so we can talk about Claremont and Kirk when we get to capital.
all right.
What happens if the Fiona Fund, we don't receive the money for the Fiona Fund?
That's the one that the operating reserve,
Okay,
it will have
thank
to
you.
fund it from operating reserve.
All
Yeah.
right, that's good. Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
You're welcome.
Any further questions on the operating? Okay, we'll move on. Want to do water next or capital?
Let's do water. Yeah. So the water fund, I've set it out in the same manner, which is understanding the revenue, the known revenue, and then the committed expenditures and the balance left for operating costs. So At the moment, as you know, we have a water rate study in the works, so I've budgeted the revenue based on 50% at the old rates and 50% at the new rates. So that's what the budget is based on. So we've got total revenue expected at 1.9 million. On the expenditure side, the committed expenditures, again, salaries and benefits being a level of service number. So unless you're willing to decrease your level of service, we can't reduce those costs. Depreciation, that is a factor based on the asset base. It's a calculation that's predetermined, and you will have no impact on that number other than not buying any assets. The admin charge and insurance, the admin charge is paid to the general operating fund. The water utility itself does not have an administration, so there's a charge between the general operating to the water utility. And property taxes, they are paid to the town. And again, that number will change if the tax rate changes. So total committed expenditures is 1.27 million of the 1.9 million. We also have debt, principal and interest. The overall principal and interest for the current year is 438,000. Once you remove the committed expenditures and the debt from the 1.9 million, we have $247,000 left to fund all the operations of the water utility. That is not sufficient to fund the operations of the water utility, hence why we're proposing an increase in the rates. That 247 needs to fund fuel and electricity and maintenance for power and pumping for 185,000. On the purification, this is for chemicals, maintenance, water testing, supplies, training. The increase in the purification chemicals is to increase for the carbon, for the taste and the quality. That was done last year. It's going to be done for an extended period of time in the current year, which is why the increase year over year. There's 366,000 there for purification. Transmission and distribution, this is repair and maintenance of water lines, not replacement, but repair and maintenance of water leaks, and then vehicle costs for 89,000. And then general and admin, it's the audit, the advertising, other costs for 11,000. So the total of these non-committed expenditures is 652,000, and we have 247. The difference of 404,000 is a transfer from surplus. We do have a surplus. I think it's about 1.2 million at the end of March, from which it's about $1 million at the end of March of 23, and that 404 will come from that surplus. So we are funded for it, just not funded in the current year. Also within the water utility, we are required to balance, and thus the need for the water rate study.
Okay, and I'd like to mention that we are in the process of a water rate study.
Yes.
We had at the fire hall last week, a public session. The last time we did a water rate study was 2006. We are looking at increasing the rates, as Brenda mentioned, $5 a month in year one, and then another $5 a month in year two. By that, after year two, we'll probably be able to move the meter billing by then, and then customers have some control over their own billing and their usage. But the reason the meters are going in is not financial, it's because the river's going dry. We have to be stewards of our river, and it's in the summertime with climate change and everything else going on, we're experiencing really dry summers, and we're having trouble drawing water from the river, and the province is watching us, so we have to be good stewards, and we have to put water meters in to make sure consumption is monitored and regulated. Is there any other questions or comments? I don't have any questions at those comments.
Brenda, for the last 3 years, correct me if I'm right or wrong, we've been drawing from our surplus there again, okay? And how many years has it been, and what have we been drawing?
Oh, and this is now from memory. I don't have. Oh, actually, I might have it with me. Just one second. I don't know how far back I have it, but it's been to the tune of. So if I go back to 2021, we
Right.
drew 162 from surplus. 2022, 239. 2023, we're proposing it'll be 205 from reserves, and this year we're proposing 404. One of the differences for the increase is we are no longer transferring 150,000. We've been approved in the first the rate study back in 2006 to transfer $150,000 from water depreciation, which is basically the water capital reserve, to the water operating. So it stayed all within water, but it allowed us to decrease the impact of the debt on the operations. And that, we are stopping that now with the new water rate study. We'll be stopping that. So that's one of the biggest reasons for the increase from the 205 to the 404 in 1 year.
What do we have in reserve when we started drawing from it, do you know?
About 1.5.
1.5 million?
Yeah, I think it was something like 1.5. We had 1.26 left at the end of March of 22.
Okay, so that's not going to last long if we keep drawing from it?
No, it was set up so that we anticipated the drawdown,
Right.
and we set it up so that the water rate study would be completed prior
Okay.
to. You do not want to lose all reserves.
Yeah.
One of the things that, or all surplus, I should say, one of the things that was pointed out with going to meters is, right now with the flat rate, you bill up front. So we bill in April for April, May, and June. So the cash flow comes in during April, May, and June. When you move to metered, you're going to be metering at the end of June or early July for April, May, June. So we will have a period of a minimum of 3 months where the cash flow will not be happening compared to the past. So we have to have enough money in the bank to be able to fund all operating costs for a period of a minimum of 3 months prior to us receiving the cash. So it is important to maintain some surplus, which translates to money in the bank, in order to fund operating costs.
Of all the operations we have, the water is the one that scares me the most, with all its environmental and different water levels and all the other things that are coming at us. It's certainly depleting our water supply, and down the road, we could be if we don't manage it properly now, we could be in a bad place. But and the other thing, of course, if it didn't, like the mayor talked about, 5 cents increase, $5, I'm sorry, $5 and $5. But if we don't do that, and when the meters come in, of course, it's going to jump significantly, and people are going to feel that it was the meters that created the issue, and in fact, we've been subsidizing. I know it was kind of funny, I stopped to talk to one of the neighbors up above my place the other day, and he said when the meter guys are in putting in their meters, they told him, they said, you guys have been spoiled for too long. So we just can't keep drawing from the reserve. That's very, very poor management. If something happens, we have a major break, we don't have money to fix it. And that's it. Thank you very much, Brenda. Thank you, Your Worship.
Just to build on that, I'll just mention that we are the last town in Nova Scotia to implement meters. Every other town in the province has them, so just wanted to make that known. That's Councillor number 1.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'm just, Brenda, if we can talk about that transfer a little bit more. So the transfer from the water reserve into the water operation was done in 2006, is that correct?
It was approved during the water rate study that was done in 2006.
And, we know now that transfer was hiding our deficiencies for many years. And the last few years we have seen our reserve dip to the point where in the future it would be in a unsustainable situation. The question from me is, why did we wait from 2006 until now to do something about it?
It wasn't a decision of doing something about it. The wording in the water rate study could be interpreted more than one way. And the interpretation, it basically said you could transfer the 150 to help fund the debt payments for a period of 5 years or until the next water rate study. Well, until the next water rate study was this year. And also to know that the depreciation fund itself was also, it was in a good balance. It wasn't like the depreciation fund was being depleted. So there was no, it was also staying within water. So whether it was, whichever fund it was in, both funds were sufficiently funded. So there was no issue one way or the other. But we stopped it simply because with this water rate study, we are now doing a water rate study. If we were to continue it, we would have to ask the UARB for permission to continue it. And we did not. We don't need to do that.
So basically what I'm understanding is that the intent back in 2006 is to have another water rate study within 5 years. And then, 5 years went and gone, and then 10 years went and gone, and another 15 years went and gone, until we finally found ourselves in this situation that we had to do a water study. that resulted in the water increase. Okay. The other question that I have, and you know, we have $404,000 deficit, but there are certain things from a service to our resident that we have done to increase that cost. And I will talk about one of them. A couple of years ago, and Blaine is here, thank you for coming, Blaine, and Blaine can talk to it more better than I can, but you know, we decided as a council that we want to do something about the water taste in Stellarton in the summer month. If you were resident in Stellarton or if you were resident outside of Stellarton, everybody has heard about that little bit of a taste to the water that we have. And it's been there for years and years and years. And, you know, we never really investigate to understand why and how to resolve it. If you look at one of the line item purification and chemicals, we went up from 149 last year to 175. So, you know, that's $26,000 increase approximately. I'm not going to say it's all attributed to the carbon that we have added, but that's just one example of us trying to service our residents to provide them with a better quality water, less taste or no taste as much as possible, to try and create that better quality for our residents. So there are some conscious decisions that we have made to increase the expenditure so that we can provide better services. The alternative is, of course, that we reduce the purification process and we put our resident in health risk, because, you know, if you don't do purification as it's required by the law, then you put your resident at risk. And that's something that we can do. So as much as the increase right now is going to hurt on both sides, from water and from operating, it's something that can be avoided. But this water taste is something dear to my heart, and I fully support it, as well as council at the time, and I appreciate all the support on that. And that's just one example of how we have improved our service to our customers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wand. We definitely have a high service level in the town of Stellarton. Any further questions or comments on water?
Brenda, I just was wondering, what's the status of the water rate study?
Okay, so we had the hearing, which you all attended last week, and out of that hearing, they had some questions. Those questions have been replied to already. They were submitted, I think, Sunday evening by Jerry Eisner, who was doing the water rate study. So once they have reviewed those, they will then prepare a decision and an order and get back to us with either an approval or a request for a revised water rate study. So we are now just waiting on the UARB to give the approval. They did say that they would try to give the approval effective July the 1st, but could not guarantee it. So if not, the rates would be effective October 1st.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, are we ready to move on to capital now?
My mic was off there when I responded, so I don't know if you'll hear it or not. All right, so the proposed capital for 23-24, Public Works equipment, a John Deere zero-turn mower for $25,000. Public Works trucks, 2 of them. We understand that they are at the point where they will probably not pass inspection, so are required for $100,000. A sidewalk plow for $180,000. The generator for the town barn for $60,000. Infrastructure is a sewer line on St. Vincent Street for $100,000. The culvert head wall on South Ford, which was in last year's as well, and we were not able to get to it last year, for $75,000. Claremont and Kirk Infrastructure, we had applied for funding, as you are aware, and received approval. When the tenders came in, the tenders were, as you already know, much higher than the original costs. We have gone back requesting an amendment, and we are waiting on the federal and provincial governments to give us approval for the amendment to our contract. So those are on hold until we receive word on those projects. Reforestation plan for $25,000. For buildings, there's a request for a system for the town hall clock. We don't know the real number for this, but we're anticipating it would be as much, if not more than $75,000. We understand it's subject to a $25,000 funding approval, and the balance would be funded by reserves. The fire truck, which I believe has already officially been approved by council in order for it to be ordered, but it will come in within this year's budget for $670,000. Recreation and active living, the LED lights at the Albion Ball Field, the lights and installation for $128,700. Outdoor fitness equipment is requested. It is approved if it's subject to 100% funding as well. So there's zero value in the budget for that at this point. Police IT server and installation for $25,000, as well in the office, the general operating for an IT server and installation at $30,000. Within water, we're simply going to be completing the water meter installation in the current year, so those funds are already committed in last year's budget, and as well, Claremont and Kirk have a water component. So total projects are $1,493,700. Those are funded from reserves for $315,000, debt, and the debt of $850 is for the sidewalk plow for $180, and for the fire truck of $670,000, so $850 for debt. I've labeled this as heritage funding, assuming that's where, if there was any funding for the town hall clock, it would be from heritage for $25,000. And then Canada Community Building Fund, also previously known as gas tax funding, for $303,700, and that gives us the $1,493,700 for total funding.
Okay, thank you. So I think we're at the point now with Claremont and Kirk, we can say that won't be done until next year. Are we there yet, or do we still have a little bit of time?
It does depend. I mean, Blaine can speak to this, but it does depend on the timing of the approval.
So we still have time, potentially? Okay, that's good to hear. Not a lot, though, yeah. Okay, and my only other question is the effect of the FCIs and the borrowing. I know we already touched on that earlier, but can you explain again where this will put us, land us?
Yeah, so the $315,000, if we were to have to fund for the Fiona costs to the tune of $200 plus the $315, our operating reserves are very healthy, so the operating reserve percentage is still fine. It's the combined reserves. It keeps us in the yellow. It's just declining us within the yellow, but it does not move us to the red. If I can add here too, one of the things that I didn't mention, we did receive the Sustainable Services Growth Fund money right at the end of the year for $477,000. That's not on here yet. I know council has had discussions about how that money will be spent, but we don't have any costs at the moment. So once you have costing, that Sustainable Services funding money is there for that project, and you could approve that at a separate time.
What council has prioritized that money for is an elevator for the building here to make it more accessible for the public and for ourselves. That's
Yes.
correct.
Yes.
Okay, any further questions on the capital?
Yeah. I still keep coming back to John Deere zero-turn mower for $25,000. And I don't understand that number still. Because I go into establishment and I see a regular lawnmower for $1,500 to $3,000. I see the zero turn at Kent this week was at $7,500 or $8,000. So I'm trying to understand, why are we buying a $25,000 mower? And if that $25,000 is going to give us 3 times the lifespan over the average that I've seen out in the market. So I have some reservation on that. And the other thing as well, on the public works trucks, I understand that they're not going to pass inspection. That's what was just said.
Our understanding is that the bodies are, to the point, the bodies are gone and they will not pass inspection.
The only thing I would say here is that we need to get to the point where we space out our purchases. So if we were to buy 2 trucks this year, what's going to happen is 5, 6, 7 years from now, we're going to have to replace those 2 trucks at the same time. But if we bought 1 truck this year and 1 truck next year or the year after, then it'll be spaced out that we don't have to pay the same amount at the same time every single time. So that's my reservation. Everything else, to tell you the truth, is bare bone. In the past, we've had so many other things that we have done. And looking at this, not much really that has been done. One thing that I would add is about the recreation, the LED lights for the Albion ball field. 2 things. First off is that we need to get to a more efficient way of the lighting. But that's just part of the equation because the current fixture is in such a disarray that I don't think we can sustainably keep on putting new bulbs in it because they are being fused into the structure itself. So whether it's going to fail this year, next year, or in 3 years' time, it is going to fail, and that's the bottom line. The LED will be a lot more efficient from a power perspective and from an efficiency perspective. Whether it's going to give us 100% our money return on our investment, it's not going to be in the short term, but in the long term it will. But that's something, again, it's one of the services that we provide to our resident and to outside resident as well, because those ball fields, soccer field, all of our sports facilities that we have, which we have the most in Pictou County, it's not only used by Stellarton residents, used by Pictou County residents and sometimes outside of Pictou County. So that is a service that we do provide for our residents and beyond. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Wand. Would the engineer like to speak on the mower? Recreation.
Yeah. Thank you, Councilor Wand. The commercial, the zero turn is commercial grade. I believe it's 22 to 24 horsepower. I believe I was a bit on the high end of putting 25, so I don't think it'll come to that. But Jamie, the public works supervisor, requested a new zero turn, and but yeah, I think 25 is a little high. I agree, and but I don't think it's going to come to that.
It's not going to come to that, but you know, you put it in the ballpark, so it might come at 22 or 21 or 23. That's still more than double the price that I've seen in the market. And Mike,
It's commercial grade,
These are commercial, so.
because we're using them every day.
so are these commercial going to be last twice as long as the regular one?
To my understanding, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Sorry?
Yes, that's right.
That's all I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Your worship,
We can, I think we already discussed the trucks. They're going to fail inspection because of body work, and if they don't, it's going to cost us more to maintain than it will to buy new ones.
The truck was just an observation for the future to try and space them out.
your worship,
Councilor Wand?
can we get a number on how many trucks we actually have? Smaller trucks I'm talking about, not the bit larger ones. How many do we actually have, Mike?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but I can say we have 8 trucks that are 10 years or older.
So we're taking 2 this year, there'll be 2 next year, and so they will
Exactly.
be spread out. It's not as
So
if
we
we
are
only
gonna
have 2 trucks that we're replacing, is that right?
We will be spreading them out, and that's what we're doing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so with that, is there any further question on the capital?
Your worship, I would like to say something on the half-ton trucks if I can for a second. I've been on council a good many years, and I've seen us try in the past to say, well, we don't need this new half-ton. We can fix the old one up. But at the end of the day, it ended up costing council more to fix the vehicles than what the vehicles were worth.
Thank you, Councilor Pence. It's also my experience with Chad with the buses, and once they get to a certain point, it's more economical to go new. Okay, so I think we're ready to, is that the complete presentation?
Yes, that was the complete presentation.
Okay. I think we've asked quite a few questions. Or anything further you'd like to hear from staff about this?
Just for council's information, this will come to the budget presentation for approval, and tax rate approval will come to the next council meeting on June 12th.
There's no motions to be made here today. So, okay. So we'll move on to open forum. Does anyone like to say anything at the open forum? Okay. Next council meeting, as the CAO just mentioned, is June 12th, 2023, 5:30 p.m. here at the council chambers. And with that, I'd ask for a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Thank you, Councilor Pence. Meeting adjourned.